Assalamualaikum, dear viewers. Earlier, we have known the political history of Anglo-Saxon period, and in this video, I am going to clarify the history of language and literature of Old English period. Old English language was basically based on dialects and dialects of the invaders who came into England in different times. First, we know that the three major tribes from the southeast of Russia, Angle, Saxon, and Jew, they came into England because of the flexibility of Roman Empire in England. And when they settled, their dialects came into England. And after then, the Vikings invaded England, and they also settled power into England. And the dialects of these Norwegians pirates also influenced the Old English language. Furthermore, the two indigenous group, Celtic and Gaelic group, actually they spoke Celtic and Gaelic language, and these two local languages got juxtaposed or fused with the foreign dialects, and thus a new language was born, and that language was called English. And later on, this language was recognized or reshaped into English. Now, the characteristics of Old English literature. Old English literature is mainly the form of manuscript and most lost because that was called a dark period because a lot of words happened, and for the words, many works were lost as those were in the form of manuscript. Whenever the invaders occupied any tribes or any community, they burnt their households. As a result, the manuscripts were burnt, or sometimes for different natural disasters, some manuscripts were lost, and thus the works of Old English period were mostly lost. And furthermore, Old English literature was oral. In fact, basically, literature was transmitted from generation to generation orally. And at the time, there was less scientific advancement, and for that, there was no printing press, and consequently, many pieces of literature were lost that time. In this phase, we would know Anglo-Saxon poets. And first great Anglo-Saxon poet is Caedmon. Caedmon's biography covered from 657 to 684. It is known that most of the Anglo-Saxon poets were anonymous. So among them, four poets came into focus, and they were Caedmon, Bede, Alfred, and Cynewulf. Caedmon is called the father of Old English poetry, and his only surviving work was a hymn, and Caedmon is basically hidden by Bede, one of his successors. And Caedmon was a poet of 7th century, and he lived in Northumbria kingdom of England. Caedmon, his successor Bede, and Bede's career covered the year 673 to 735. Is the only poet with full biographical recognition, whereas most of the Old English authors were anonymous. Bede actually wrote histories, treatises, scientific books, and theological books. He was also called a saint, and his great work, the Ecclesiastical History of English People, was written in Latin, and it's a religious work. In fact, this work highlighted the English people's history related to church. And Bede is called the father of English history. And after Bede, Beowulf. And Beowulf basically epic work, and actually nobody knew about Beowulf, whether Beowulf was a writer, but it was confirmed that Beowulf was an epic poem, and it's about Beowulf, a mythological Norwegian hero who set Anglo-Saxon king from the classes of monster and dragon. Beowulf is the greatest and most notable work of Old English or Anglo-Saxon period. In addition, the author of Beowulf is anonymous, though sometimes it is thought was the writer of Beowulf. But as Beowulf is the name of the epic poem Beowulf, and there was no proof about the writer, And in fact, it was an anonymous writing of the author, and it is an epic poem of 3,182 lines. Moreover, Beowulf deals with the heroic action of a superhero who saved the kingdom of Helgar from dragon and monster. Helgar actually was one of the kinsmen of Beowulf. Beowulf not only highlighted Anglo-Saxon lives, but also it enriched English language and literature. Beowulf is a story of King Helgar kingdom was attacked by a terrible sea monster named Grendel. Then Beowulf, the mighty Norwegian hero, in fact, a Scandinavian hero, heard the story, the pathetic story of his kinsman. Then he came to rescue King Helgar from the attack of the terrible sea monster, and then he fought against the sea monster and killed it, and then against his mother, who came to take revenge for the killing of her son, the monster Grendel, and later against dragon Beowulf fought. But at the last battle, Beowulf was killed. But by sacrificing his life, Beowulf protected the kingdom of his kinsman Helgar. And now, what Anglo-Saxon characteristics of life can be extracted from the theme of Beowulf? The Anglo-Saxon believed in heroism in a war. At that time, there were existence of demon, dragon, enemy, and those things, whatever those could be imaginative and mythological, were given position in literature. The Anglo-Saxon had great bond regarding kinship, as Beowulf, a faraway kinsman of King Helgar. Whenever Beowulf heard about King Helgar's disaster, he came and rescued King Helgar from the attack of the monster. And from the theme of Beowulf, it can be understood that crime must be abandoned. When the sea monster killed a lot of people, then Beowulf came to take against the killing. When the monster was killed by Beowulf, then his mother came on the earth to take revenge. Thus, killing must be avenged. This theme is focused in the lives of the Anglo-Saxon people. And no doubt, killing must be avenged by counter-killing. This theme ultimately is focused in the Beowulf. And definitely, mead hall was the means of entertainment at the time in the Old English period. And now, the symbols in Beowulf. Beowulf represents power of the Anglo-Saxon. The monster represents Africa continent. The dragon, a mythological animal of China, represents Asia. And actually, by defeating the two animals, the monster and dragon, the Anglo-Saxon conquered two continents, Africa and Asia, and ultimately the whole world. Furthermore, Beowulf also represents the ambition of the Anglo-Saxon people. In this case, I would show the form of Anglo-Saxon poetry, heroic poetry in fact. Epic in style, use of unrhymed alliterative verse. Later, this verse came to be known as blank verse. Basically, Anglo-Saxon heroic poetry developed English language and literature. Only this single piece of poetry, Beowulf produced above 3,000 verses. Later, Chaucer and Shakespeare developed the rest of the English language, as it is known that Shakespeare produced about 40,000 verses. And now in this case, I would introduce Cynewulf, another Old English author, was the 9th century poet. Cynewulf is a mysterious poet. His biography is not recorded anywhere. Cynewulf and his followers wrote both religious and secular poetry called extra books, and they wrote in Old English. Their notable poems are The Wanderer, The Seafarer, The Dream of the Road, The Wife's Lament, and The Battle of Maldon. Finally, Old English prose. King Alfred was only the prose writer of the period, found in the history of Old English period, and his career lasted from 871 to 899. He was a patron of literature and a warrior. Basically, he translated the Latin work into English, and he focused on writing English people's life histories, and thus he recorded Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. And he wrote in systematic way, avoiding vernacularity, and translated many old Latin works into English, as he translated Bede's The Ecclesiastical History of English People into English from Latin. And thus Old English language and literature were developed. Thank you.